28 weeks, Israelis have been protesting their government's proposed judicial overhaul because it would severely limit the freedom and independence of the Israeli Supreme Court. It's important to know that the Israeli Supreme Court has always served in the role of offering checks and balances with the parliament, the Knesset in Israel, in ensuring a just and democratic Jewish state. So for 7 months, tens of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets each week to demand a free and unrestrained judicial branch. That's a very long time to maintain these protests. This protest movement has also experienced some initial successes, particularly this past spring when the government didn't unilaterally push through its huge overhaul in the face of this overwhelming consensus against it. And then with these initial successes, the protest movement was able to continue, and they've continued and continued, and it's truly been an incredible testament to the idea that we are all part of a greater whole. So often we feel unable to create change in our world. We feel limited by the powerful structures that seem to be in place. How can we, as mere individuals, each of us all alone, make a more just world in the face of all this injustice? The answer, at least from Israel, seems to be we need to join together. We are stronger together. We can impact the world together. And I imagine for the Israelis who've taken it upon themselves to maintain these protests week in and week out for so many months now, the knowledge that they're not alone, that they're part of something bigger than themselves, must offer them some strength and support when they start to feel weary. And now, in the last week, these pro-democracy protests have begun to grow in size once more. In fact, as we sit here welcoming in Shabbat, there are tens of thousands of people walking all across the state of Israel, heading towards Jerusalem again. Why are they doing this? Well, again, the Israeli government has started to draft laws to limit the independence of the Israeli court, and so people are coming back together in huge numbers to protest against this. It's surprising timing that in the midst of these discussions about the importance of a fair and independent judiciary in our homeland, that we should read in this week's Torah portion seemingly about the exact same thing. This week we read the Torah portion Devarim. It's the first in the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses shares his final words with the Israelites before they enter the Promised Land. Moses reminds the Israelites of the journey that has brought them to the edge of freedom. And he begins with a discussion of how the Israelites organized themselves and how they adjudicated matters in the wilderness. He starts by acknowledging the enormity of the task of leading a people all on his own. How can I bear unaided the trouble of you? And in answering his own question, he continues, so I took your tribal leaders, wise and experienced people, and appointed them heads over you, chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, chiefs of 50s, chiefs of 10s, and officials for your tribes. I charged your magistrates at that time as follows: hear out your fellow Israelites and decide justly between one party and the other. Be it a fellow Israelite or a stranger, you shall not be partial in judgment. Hear out low and high alike. For neither party, fear neither party, for judgment is God's. There are two things that I want to point out about how Moses reminds the Israelites of how they will govern themselves in the Promised Land. First is Moses' assurances to the magistrates that their only duty is to serve the people, not to be swayed by the identity of whoever's bringing forward a case, whether it is a stranger or an Israelite, whether it's someone with great power or very little. Our rabbinic sages argue that this point is an important one, as they imagine any number of scenarios where a judge might feel undue pressure from outside forces to support the case of a powerful individual, even if the law and justice is not on their side. The idea of an independent judiciary dates all the way back to the Torah. It's a cornerstone of our understanding of what justice looks like as Jews. And so we can understand why for 28 weeks now, Israelis have marched in their cities and towns protesting any infringement on that expectation, protesting any undue power that might put unfair advantage in the hands of the few, at the expense of justice for the greater whole. In addition to this impassioned argument for fair and unbiased magistrates, Moses himself has to learn that he is a part of the greater whole. He asks, "How can I bear unaided the trouble of you?" He cannot carry the people all by himself. In fact, when he tried to do that after they first left Egypt, his father-in-law, Jethro, showed him what a disservice he was doing to himself, to the people, to the justice they deserved. And this will continue to be true long after Moses dies and the people enter Israel without him. We are still part of that greater whole, and a system that only relies on one ruler to control all power is one that is a disservice to the people. Rabbi Talia Avnon Ben-Veniste, who is an Israeli Reform rabbi and is now the director of the Reform Movement's Israeli Rabbinical Program in Jerusalem, she writes of Moses' question. His words are the path to tomorrow, she says, for the Jewish people. You are the path. You are the bridge. You are the leaders. You are the future. You are the promise. We, all of us, we take wandering through this land upon ourselves. With loving hands, God gave us the Torah and leadership. Rabbi Avnon Ben-Veniste asks each of us to take responsibility not just for ourselves and our families, but for our people as a whole. Not even Moses could do this by himself. And so when rights are denied to our Israeli brothers and sisters, it is our job to be part of the process of ensuring that does not remain the case. For we are, all of us, part of this greater whole, this greater Jewish people. Rabbi Shai Held suggests that part of Moses' admonishment of the magistrates and his encouragement to them to protect their impartiality comes from a fear that we all have innately of speaking out, especially when we might be responding to powerful people in the community or even to long-held beliefs and norms. He explains that fear of speaking one's mind can run very deeply, not just individually, but also in Jewish communal life. And sometimes it can get in the way of our pursuit of justice. Israel in particular can sometimes feel like the third rail in our Jewish communal life. It is too powerful to touch. And yet, on this issue in particular, many Israelis, even some who used to suggest that American Jews stay out of Israel's politics, are now asking for our support from their friends and family across the globe. We are all part of this greater whole, this broader sense of the Jewish community, and our deep-seated sense of justice is at stake. Perhaps with a little fear and trepidation in our hearts, we too can be part of moving the needle forward and supporting the protesters. I will say, I am not generally a fan of concluding sermons with a list of resources. So, for right now, I will simply say, if this is something that you wish to learn more about, please do not hesitate to reach out. And at the Oneg, I know that there are a few more people who are very passionate about this subject as well and would love to talk to you. I have recommendations for you, and we can use this as a way to become part of the greater whole, to connect together. So though it is thousands of miles away, supporting justice in the land of Israel, the land of both our ancestors and our modern brethren, is not only for our greater whole, but it is indeed for our greater good. Shabbat Shalom.